Vaughn, we'll go first to you. This is not how the president was expecting to mark 6 months in office. He's putting this now at Bondi's feet as the DOJ pushes to release some of these documents. Where does this go next?
Right. At the same time, Allie, he could have let the Wall Street Journal publish the article and moved on. But what we have seen the president increasingly do, not only now as president, but also as political candidate, is go and file lawsuits against individuals, particularly news outlets, who he believes disparage him. And in this case, the Wall Street Journal and the Dow Jones is his latest target. Of course, he reached settlements, controversial ones with ABC and CBS, effectively going before a court and getting a determination from a judge that may have cost them even more money, but also potentially drawing the greater ire of the president. And in the case of the Wall Street Journal, the Dow Jones making it clear that they will move forward and fight this lawsuit. Just this morning, the Southern District of Florida assigning this to a Obama-appointed judge. And now potentially there could be a hearing in which the two sides argue over this. I think that this is a sorry to conflate these two different cases here. This is a moment here where this is a moment here where the Department of Justice is now seeking to have the grand jury transcripts released here, and ultimately it's going to be that Southern District of Florida judge that will make this determination. So there is a lot here on the line, but the president, instead of just letting it go here, is deciding to try to, I guess you could say, make a concession with having the grand jury transcripts. Of course, though, that pales in comparison to the full unsealing or attempt to unseal a greater amount of evidence.
Yeah, and there's a question about if that's actually going to make anything public because grand jury testimony is so typically secretive. But Mel, we've been talking about the efforts on the Hill. Senator Ron Wyden, for example, and his push last hour. He's calling for other finance-related Epstein documents to be made public. He's not the only one, though. You've got Senator Dick Durbin also making his own push within DOJ. Can you detail that one for us? And the other piece of this, which is that discharge petition that's working its way through the House. Basically, is Congress going to be able to successfully compel any of this into public view?
Yeah, that's a great question. And on the Wyden investigation, he's actually been investigating the financial network of Epstein for 3 years now on Capitol Hill, following the money trail. But he's really using this moment as an opportunity to try to pressure the Department of Justice to actually release some of these bank records and other financial documents that he's been seeking. And he also revealed on social media that the Trump administration has an Epstein file detailing over 4,000 wire transfers and almost $1.1 billion flowing through just one of his banks, hundreds of millions more through others. Meanwhile, then you have Dick Durbin, who's also adding to this pressure campaign. He wrote a letter to the Department of Justice asking them to explain some discrepancies between their past statements, teasing the release of Epstein files, to that July 7th memo when they said there was no client list and that Epstein did commit suicide, and that is how he ultimately died. But also in these letters, Durbin revealed that agents were asked to flag any documents that mentioned Trump, but he also claims that the FBI was, quote, pressured by Bondi to do a rush review. So it's unclear what other information Democrats are going to get on Capitol Hill. They are in the minority, but when asked for comment, the FBI said it has no comment on the Durbin letters.
Yeah, certainly some questions to be asked about what Durbin says his office was told there. But Susan, in your latest piece, you explain how fighting these conspiracy theories is going to be an uphill battle for Trump. Really, it's the consequences of many of his own actions. A new Reuters Ipsos poll says nearly 70% of Americans believe the government is hiding details about Epstein's clients. That includes more than half of all Republicans. The president's kind of used to skating through these kinds of controversies. But does this one strike you as different? It certainly is more long-lasting than we're used to.
You know, he's used to conspiracy theories, but usually he's fueling them.
Yeah.
He came to political power questioning falsely where Barack Obama was born. He continues to argue inaccurately that the 2020 election was stolen from him. And he's learned that once you fan these flames, convince people that there's smoke, there's going to be fire, how do you then turn around and say, well, in this particular case, you can trust me to be telling you the truth? So I think it's going to be hard. I think Trump is well aware that just releasing the grand jury testimony, which is still not guaranteed to happen, is not going to settle this issue.
Yeah, I also think that there's something about this that, yes, it's about the Epstein files, but it's also about the very thing that Trump was so good at leveraging back in 2015 when I and you, all of us, started covering him, which is this idea of mistrust in institutions and him being the outsider that comes in and sort of clears house because he knows where the secrets are, what's in the dusty cupboards. And now we're seeing that that's not what's happening. Do you think then for the MAGA movement as it goes forward, anyone else will be able to successfully leverage that kind of outsider mantle to restore trust and faith and transparency when clearly the people who were the purveyors of that message are not doing that now that they're in control?
You know, I think it's a surprise for President Trump that he is the ultimate outsider. But when you're president of the United States, you are in charge. You are, by definition, the ultimate insider. And I think that there's some adjustment there that he's having problems with.
Even still, second term.
Even still, second term. He would describe himself as an outsider, but he is so clearly in charge. In fact, he has done the remarkable thing in the first 6 months of his second term of amassing unprecedented powers for the presidency. He is an insider the way we've never seen a previous president be.
Yeah, I think that is a really fascinating thing. You're almost watching all of these folks who came in as outsiders, whether it's Trump or Dan Bongino, the deputy director now at the FBI, who were unconstrained by being outside. And now that they're inside the true halls of power, there's serious constraints, in large part because reality is what reality is, and it's not the reality that they told their supporters about. Vaughn, there's also a lot of questions about what caused the Trump-Epstein fallout around 2004. Last hour, the New York Times reporter Luke Broadwater told us that this is one key area that Trump doesn't really want people digging into. You say that there are some tapes that might shed some light on this. Where are those tapes? Who has them? What might come of them?
Right. Of all people, Steve Bannon has 15 hours of footage that he shot in interview form with Jeffrey Epstein. Back in 2019, before he was rearrested in New York, it was Steve Bannon, upon leaving the White House, who worked directly with Jeffrey Epstein. And Bannon has suggested that he wants to turn this footage into a documentary. He released an initial trailer back in 2021 that included just 35 seconds of that supposed 15 hours of footage. And this comes at a time that Steve Bannon is calling for the complete unsealing of all the evidence, a special counsel to look at the Epstein files, but he has not revealed or published his own 15 hours of raw footage, suggesting that he may publish a documentary next year here. At the same time, this really hits at the heart of the Donald Trump relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And to go back to the lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal that is going to go before the Southern District of Florida judge, I think it's important that there would, if this lawsuit were to proceed, you could expect the Dow Jones to seek a deposition with the current president of the United States. And Donald Trump has every right to go and testify under oath of deposition to his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And so I think there's a lot of questions that, frankly, could be revealed as part of any evidence and turning over of records. We know we have seen a history of the president fighting such litigation in the past here. But I think this goes at the heart of why these two men's relationship ended in the early 2000s here. And was it over, in the case of Mark Epstein, the brother of Jeffrey Epstein, he told me last week that Jeffrey Epstein ended the relationship because he thought that Trump was a crook. Stephen Chung, the communications director to the New York Times over the weekend, suggested that it was Donald Trump who ended the relationship with Jeffrey Epstein because he thought he was a creep. So there's a lot of, frankly, unanswered questions here about the relationship between the president and Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, we can add those to the ever-growing list of questions. But, Susan, the more things change, the more they stay the same, especially when it comes to Trump's love of the lawsuit. And the lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal, certainly part of that pattern. The $10 billion price tag attached to it, also striking to me. We talked about the legal view on that in the last hour. But I think it comes against this backdrop of chilling or attempts to chill media organizations that are doing investigatory work about him.
Yeah. The Wall Street Journal did not publish this without realizing that Trump was likely to sue them about it. Interesting that it's being that the Wall Street Journal, of course, part of the empire of Rupert Murdoch, who has been crucial supporter and friend of Donald Trump. I think this lawsuit may be directed not only at the Wall Street Journal, but also at everybody else in the media world to say, look, if you publish something that's critical of me, I'll come after you. The Wall Street Journal says they trust their reporting. They're going to stand up legally and otherwise. But there might be a chilling effect, I think, on other news organizations wanting to be very, very, very sure that they are not only telling the truth, but are prepared to defend it against these kind of really expensive litigation.